Hello, welcome back. Yes, I am still here. I'm sorry, I've been super busy, ridiculously busy in fact, busy breaking pretty much everything I own. I mean literally everything I own. So on the list of fixes today, we're going to go through the rebuild of my turbo. It's an HX55 HX60 hybrid based on an HE551 CHRA, and I'm going to go through the process of putting in a new bearing kit and building it all back together, hopefully to some kind of working state. So that's what we're going to do today. Hope you enjoy this one. It's a little bit different. My name's Johnny. Welcome to the channel. Melett Mod. Okay, so we made it into the workshop. What I'm going to do now is go through the parts from the turbo that I've taken out, show you all the stripped components, and then we're going to get the new kit and have a look and make sure everything matches up before we start to reassemble it. So on the table, what I have is the old exhaust housing. We've got the compressor housing, we've got the turbine for the exhaust, the hot side, attached to the shaft. We've got the compressor wheel and the large O-ring that seals the housing to the CHRA. Then we've got all of the parts of the thrust bearing, the other components here we've got are the thrust plate itself, the thrust bearing, the journal bearings, which are very cooked. They are baked in oil, so the oil's been flowing pretty slow through here and just baking as it's been going through the turbo. That's ultimately what the failure is one of these. Now if I slide these over the shaft, you'll see there is a fair amount of wiggle. You probably can't quite pick that up. There's quite a lot of wiggle on that one. If I get the other bearing, much less wiggle. Now that was the hot side bearing, was okay. It was actually the cold side bearing that started to fail, and that small amount of wiggle on there allows the shaft to move, which means the compressor wheel will shake like that and it starts to oscillate in the bearing under load, and that's what was causing the whining sound. Also got my piston rings out. Got some new bolts to go in for the T6 flange. There's the plate for the thrust washer as well, the oil cap which has the seal in it with the piston. Got the old big circlip to retain that, the exhaust heat shielding, the oil deflector plate, and 4 of the circlips that hold the journal bearings in, and the nut that goes on the end of the compressor wheel. Also got the CHRA here, which has been cleaned off. I did air dry it as much as I could. These do flash rust really quick, so you've got to be on them. You can spray them with a film of oil or something similar, ACF 50, which I was going to do, but I didn't, so there is actually even here little spots of rust picking up on this already. These have all been through my ultrasonic cleaner in various parts and just cleaned at 55C with some Carbusonic in there, and I did them for about 20 to 40 minutes depending on how much scrubbing they needed. Okay, so Telford Turbos have sent me a kit. This was just under £50 plus delivery, and this is a kit for an HE551W, which, although this is not an HE551 turbo, there are bits of HE551, mostly this piece here, the CHRA, and that's what we're going to be paying attention to. Technically this is an HX55 hot end, so this is HX55, this is HX55 sized in terms of the housing size, and the CHRA, I think these used also on some HX55s, but I'm not 100% certain. I do know it's an HE551 for our purposes, because that's what bearing kit fits. And then the cold side, 76108 on the compressor, and the housing 1.1 AR, that's an HX60, so it's a bit of a hybrid, a bit of a Franken turbo. But what we're going to do is start smashing it all back together. So what we'll need is a tripper can with some oil. Just got some 5W30 in there. In fact, it might be 5W40, which is what the engine takes anyway. That's what we'll be running it on eventually again. Also got a little pot which I'm going to put some 5W40 in as well to pre-soak the bearings. We've got various picks and circlip pliers and all that kind of stuff. there's really not a lot to it. A lot of this is just fiddly manipulation. The circlip pliers obviously help, and so does the pick. So let's plonk you down here, and we'll get on to checking the components. So first up, I'm going to check my bearings. Now the surface has all been wiped down. I've used a tack cloth. I know it looks grubby, but there's actually no nonsense on here. It is actually relatively clean. It's very important not to get any metal shards or debris in your turbo when you're rebuilding it, because that would be bad. Now I'm going to check the outer diameter of these. Look to be correct, and the inner diameter also looks to be correct. Now both the journal bearings are the same for this application. Your mileage may vary, of course. I'm going to put the old components above and new components below. There we are. So this little piece here holds the piston ring, which is effectively an oil seal, which will sit in the oil seal plate with the piston on it. And that's what keeps oil from leaving your turbo and entering into the cold side housing. So the old and new there look the same. Internal and external diameters are the same, so that's good. The same for this little thrust washer here. Again, identical. Obviously you can tell one's got a little hot with some markings on it where it's got rather warm. That's fine. We're not going into why the old turbo failed. It failed because the oil was very slow flowing, because there was a 10W60 in there, and these Holsets really want 10W40 at most. You might be able to get away with a 5W50. I think for my application I'm going to see what the pressure's like on a 5W40, and then if not getting high enough pressures, I may leave it there depending what the idle is. If I'm getting really low idle, then I'll have to bump it up to 5W50, in which case that'll mean that my main bearings or rod bearings and cam bearings just have a little extra clearance, but we'll see. We've got to try and keep this turbo happy again, because rebuilding it is obviously a bit of a pain in the backside. Right, first things first, I've cleaned out all the grooves and cleaned the shaft off, given it a light polish, not with a gritty polish, but with some polishing wax, so that's come up nice. That's all been degreased. What we will do, just get some oil and pop it in here. There we are. We know the journal bearings are correct, so I'm just going to plop them in there, just get them coated. Okay, next up, let's have a look at the thrust bearing, and these are different as well depending on the application of the turbo. This particular one is slightly different to the HX55 or the HE500 VGs, in that the oil pocket is directly opposite the oil exit. So the oil actually comes firing into this hole, and then it gets displaced from there. There's a squirter on the inside, a squirter on the outside, and there's some oil retention grooves on both sides. So I know that that looks correct. If we look at my original, we can see everything lines up. The dowel pins are in the same location, and yeah, that is pretty cruddy. We do have a new circlip that holds the oil plate in place. We also have a new nut for the compressor wheel, some new V-band nuts, and we have the, mixed up the pistons, the piston rings. We have new piston rings, single for the cold side, and then there should be two in there for the hot side, which we have. We'll just match those up, and they look correct as well. I'm going to make sure I get them put in the right orientation so I don't put old stuff in when there should be new stuff. Right, we've also got 4 circlips, new circlips, and these are to hold the journal bearings in to the CHRA. There's our old ones. So everything looks good here, everything matches, everything is nice and fresh, nice and new. Even the new clip here, you can see if I hold one edge on that other edge, the outer edge, you can see just there it's actually wider because of course it's been uncompressed. So even though it looks good, there is still not as much tension in this as there would be a new one. So with that, let's move all the old stuff out of the way so we don't get confused. So I'm going to work with this shaft first, and the first things to go on are going to be the piston rings. There's 2 of these and they go over the shaft and down, and then you've got to get the first one on but past the first groove. So we might need to just push him out of there, but again, really delicate with these. There we are, and we're caught there on the lower. We didn't open it up too much. It's not distorted, and I'm looking to make sure that's uniform all the way around, which it is, so we know we've done well with that. Second one is a bit easier. Second one, of course, we'll just go over. I'm starting from the back and pushing around the sides to the front, and that will just pop in there as well. So now we have 2. Now ideally these want to be set 180 degrees out from each other. When you put this together, give it the best opportunity of a good oil seal. And the reason for that is because oil then can't make its way directly through one ring gap through the next ring gap, and yes, these will be closed up, but it's always best if you can to have them opposing. Now they do spin, they do catch, they will move. There's no guarantee they're going to stay there. They probably won't, but that's just the way that I prefer to do that. Okay, going to get a little blob of oil on there. Now, I don't want to get too much on the hot side, so I don't want to smoke massively on startup, but it is going to smoke the first time you start it. It's just the way it goes. Right, we'll leave that soaking. Next up, we've got to get the inner circlips. Now, there are 2 circlips, one on each side, which means there are 2 grooves. You can probably just about make out down there is the lower groove, and up here is the upper groove. It's the same on the hot side. All the way down there is the lower groove, just that's it, and all the way up there is the upper groove. So we're going to start with putting in the circlips, and for these you can get away with squeezing them, as long as they don't fall the way through, squeezing them into place. Because they don't touch the bore until you get down to your groove. So I'm just trying to drop it down in there with my finger until I find one part of the groove that it sits in, and this is a bit fiddly. If you do have a set of micro circlip pliers, it makes it a lot easier. I don't. I've only got some relatively normal sized ones, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my pick in the end of one of these to try and get this settled in there. So I'm just going to locate the holes. If you do have the luxury of having a set of small circlip pliers, then obviously, one, you're very lucky. 2, I'm very jealous. Okay, that appears to be one in there. I'm just going to spin it around, make sure it's seated. So you can just about see one in there now. It's just sat in its groove, front and back. I've spun it around 360 to make sure there's no orientation or location. Doesn't seem to be. So I'm happy with that first one. Right, now I'm going to take one of my journal bearings. Before I do that, I'm just going to pop a little bit of oil in the bore, like that, smush it around. Then I'm going to drop my journal bearing in. Take a little tiny bit of persuasion to get in there, but do not rattle the bits out of it. You don't want to score anything. You don't really want to score the outer. Although the shaft floats on the inner surface, you still don't want to score the outer because you do have oil flow around that. There is a maintained gap. Second circlip is a little easier because you've got a surface to prevent it from slipping down too far. So the second one, again, I just put the back in, bring the front in, and it just clips in place. So not quite in the groove yet. That's one side and the other. Are we in there? Not 100%. That's one side and that's the other. So now that's in there, I'll give that a little spin to make sure it's seated. Yep, that's on there. So now we have the second circlip on top of the journal bearing, and that is looking good. Now we can install the other side. So again, I'm going to start by pushing down the back. Right, so I've got the other circlip in there in the second groove. I'm going to pull out the new bearing, which has been soaking for a while. I'm going to pop that in the top and just gently wiggle it down. It should go in with no force at all. A little wiggle and it should just drop down. I've also put a bit of oil in the bore. I'll take it out again and just show you where to stick that again. Same as last time, just a bit of oil in the centre. Spread it around nicely, drop your bearing back in, little wiggle and it should just go in. And with that, we'll get the final circlip put in. It's going to go insert the back end first and then pull the sides in, being very careful not to gouge anything. We don't want to bust our bearings before we've even given it a shot. There's one side. And the other. Again, give it a spin, 360 to make sure it's seated properly, and now we've got both of our bearings in there. Okay, next up we're going to build the assembly up as follows. We're going to take the plate, that's going to go in on the top there. That's where that sits. Make sure there's a nice little bit of oil in there. We're then going to take our thrust bearing, going to align the oil pocket with the oil feed hole, so that way round, and place that on. Okay, after a little bit of gentle pressure and a little bit of manipulation, that's dropped in there real nice. Don't tap it or hammer it home. It's delicate. It's going to be a tight fit. It's designed to be a tight fit. Right, a bit more oil. Now we're going to look at the oil deflector plate, which is going to sit there. The job of that is to make sure the oil goes back down the return line as effectively as possible. The next up is the O-ring. Now this O-ring actually sits on the outer edge of this plate. Now the one that I've taken out, it is slightly smaller, it's sort of shrunk. The newer one, it will go in there, but it will pop into the recess, so we'll do that next. It just goes in the lower groove, and you have to pop it in all the way around and feed it in. It's designed to be a little bit bigger so that it keeps itself in that groove. So just work it in all the way around, and eventually it will just pop into place. Run your finger around it, again, a bit more oil, and just get in there and give it a good liberal coating. You can just about see it in there. If I get a pointer, it lives just up inside there, you can just see the rubber. There it is there. So next up we've got our piston ring that sits on this seal that goes in here, like that way around, and that whole lot is going to sit on there like that. So that effectively sits in here, spinny spinny, that sits on top, and there's a piston ring that goes on that. So here's the ring, and again, just a case of not pinging this across the workshop, but just one side then the other, and it'll just drop straight on. A dab of blob of oil on there, and this will press into the housing. Again, try and wiggle it in as gently as possible, compressing those rings. It will go in, don't just press and force it in like I've seen people do. It's a guaranteed way of catching your piston ring, and just it's going to cause you issues down the line. Okay, so that's now complete. So that is now going to sit in here. Now this should eventually tap down and sit on there nice and true, so you can use a rubber handle for this, just to gently, I say gently, tap it home. You'll hear when it's home because it will stop making noise, otherwise it will stop making that tinny noise. It will make a thud rather than a clang. Right, with that done, we're now ready for the big circlip. Now I do have some circlip pliers for this. Got the right ones. I think these are the right ones. So I'm going to use them. Bevel up on this. So flat side down, back in, give them a squeeze. Big old squeeze. Try not to ping it off the other side of the workshop. That's something I'm quite proficient in doing. And for this, I'm just going to tap the end down very gently until we hear a nice snap. Now I know that's seated, it does stick out one end more than the other, but we know the assembly's in there, we know it's complete, we know it's good. Right, now we can move on to putting all of this together. Let's try manipulating the wheels as opposed to the whole assembly. So this will take a bit of going. What you're trying to do is you're effectively trying to get these piston rings to a point where you've compressed them enough that they will go in. Again, you don't want to nick them, you don't want to force them. They will go, it will just take a little bit of time. Just try and put the pressure on the nut, don't put the pressure on the fins. And eventually it will go. Let's just have a look and see where we're getting caught up. So yeah, we're getting caught up on the first one, so we are getting caught up on these rings. Now there is something else you can do to try and help this. Again, I'm going to try and make these 180 out. They are roughly. Is if the heat shield weren't there, it'd be a lot more simple, right? You'd just be able to simply compress them and stick them in. However, you can just circulate the heat shield, and that compresses the piston ring as it's going in, sort of from all sides. And that seems to have worked for the first one. And there's the second one. 2 good clicks. Now that's sat in there, we know that that's home. We know that the clearance there is the same as when we took it out, so that is now sat where it wants to be, which is good news. Right, without knocking the shaft back out again, what we want to do is get the nut back in the vise. Again, I really don't want to rest this on the vanes. That would be a very, very bad thing. So I'm just going to tighten that up with enough to, again, not distort. Okay, looking good. Let's bring you up here now. So there's the top side. We've got the shaft all the way through. I do have some marks on the shaft, which is where I'm going to align the compressor wheel. In fact, I've got 2 marks. I've been very proficient. So for this, again, don't need oil on this part, but I am just going to pop a little bit on just to help. Yes, it might smoke a little bit when I first start it up, but my primary objective here is not to worry about a minute of smoke. It's to protect everything I need to protect whilst I'm assembling this thing. So this sits directly on top. The end of the compressor wheel here sits directly on that little section we put the piston ring on, so the oil seal ring. And that then butts up against the thrust washer, which gives us, there's one scratch, there's the other, which gives us the side load. So the thrust, when this is thrusting downwards because it's compressing air, it wants to push itself in towards the housing, it's that thrust bearing that's taking up that load. Now on this, just want to make sure they're aligned to my markings, so just peer over the top. I have 2 very faint lines. They are marked up. I mean, it matters way more on a ball bearing turbo. In fact, this is an interesting point. The guys at Telford Turbos said bring it up for a balance. So I'm really intrigued here. I'm going to stick this back together as it is. We are going to go up there and see how different the balance is from how we've put it back together, which is from the marked location, versus what they're actually measuring. For now, I'm going to stick on the new nut. Now the old nut was again unground, so typically it's the wheels that are ground on the compressor side, and it is the nut that's ground on the exhaust side. These are reverse thread, so just bear that in mind. Okay, so the torque level is 20.3 Newton meters. So I'm going to get that set now. It's a 15mm 12-point socket as well. And once you have this on there, you've got to remember you're going to be undoing it. Reverse thread. So, right, 20.3. That is now assembled. I'll move it onto the bench. So I've got to have it here, so I've got the nut accessible from the top, so when it comes to reorientating, I've got it in the right place. That's really what that comes down to. Okay, that's sat on there now. Let's just pop on one of the nuts. I'm not going to clamp it, just want to get it started for now. I'll just hand spin it on. Again, I may have to re-clock this depending on what's going on, but that's fine. Hand tight for now is fine. I'm happy. Next up is the ridiculous sized O-ring, which is going to go around here. I want any twists in it, want it to sit down there nicely. Where do I want this? Stick it on that side as well. I think I normally have this. That's the front side of the turbo. Yeah, I'd have it that way around. And I think the outlet goes about there. So again, placing this down gently, V-band on, new nut, spin that on. I have this mad ability to lose sockets. And there we go. Okay, now all the V-bands are finger tight, we've got everything in the rough sort of orientation, we're pretty much done. What we can do on this side is we can check to see how free spinning this actually is. Which, it's never going to be as good as a ball bearing turbo, of course not. But looking at that, for a journal bearing, I'm really happy with that. It's also worth noting as well on this one, we can see there's a grind here and a grind here. This is from previous balancing, so this isn't from what I did in the vise. I had it gripped from the outer edges, but the lines on here, you can actually see the grind marks from where it's been balanced in the past. Now, everyone says that you can take these apart, mark them, put them back together with a rebuild kit, and they should be absolutely fine and in balance. But that's not how we do things. So I'm going to go up to Telford Turbos with this, and they're going to put the whole CHRA inside their balancing machine. It doesn't just balance the shaft and the wheels, or the compressors on the shaft, it balances the whole CHRA as an entire unit. And that's really important. And I know I've put this back on within a couple of degrees of where it came off, so it'd be very interesting to see whether the tails are true, that you can just mark them, stick them back together. And yes, this isn't going to be as bad as a ball bearing, a roller bearing turbo, or anything that's much smaller, which obviously spins a little bit higher. This spinning somewhere up to 125, 135,000 RPM isn't going to be your 220,000 RPM ball bearing turbo. So balancing isn't as much of a big deal. However, something killed these bearings, and obviously oil didn't help. But we're going to see how in balance it still is after we've been to Telford Turbos. Anyway, look, we're one step closer to getting this thing back on the road now. Should be spooling up in no time, but we'll save Telford Turbos for the next part in this little mini-series. That's it for today. Thanks ever so much for watching. Have a little think about clicking subscribe, and I hope you like this slightly different content away from the drones for a change. But that's all. Stay safe, be well, and I'll catch you soon.